So who knew people would like giving their hot takes so much? I might have to start including hot take videos twice a week at this rate with the amount of takes I've been getting, and some of these are pretty good, which is why I felt the need to make yet a part 2 video of hot takes like I did last week. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bull Central here. I hope you're all doing well. If you didn't have a chance to catch the first hot takes video from earlier today, I'll link it here as well as in the description. I'll also link the Discord server in the description as well in case you would like to join that. It's a great spot to chat about Bulls basketball, as well as we have live chats during the games. But let's kick it off with the first hot take for this video, and this comes from my guy B Cubs. He says the Bulls will close out January above 500, led by Markkanen, and in the next 5 games, Lowry, Wendell, and Thaddeus Young will outscore Coby, Zach, and Otto. So this is a good one actually, because we'll be able to see in the next couple of weeks if you end up being right. So first, let's start off with the Bulls finishing above 500 in January. So as of right now, the Bulls are 4-5 in this month. As you mentioned, they have 5 remaining games in the month against the Hornets, Lakers, Celtics, Grizzlies, and Blazers. So not an easy closeout to the schedule by any means, but let's say they go ahead and beat the Hornets, which I think is very doable. That's a winnable game. The Bulls should match up pretty decently well with the Hornets, and by the way, it looks like Hutchinson and Satoransky will likely be cleared to play by then, so that's also good news. So that brings them to 5-5 in January at 500 with that assumption. That means of the 4 remaining games, they need to go 3-1 in order to finish out the month with a record above 500. And the Lakers and Celtics are going to be tough games. However, with the Celtics, it's still up in the air whether Jason Tatum will return. They're shorthanded in general, so we also don't know for certain if the game will in fact be postponed. Their first game against the Celtics was already postponed as it is. The Grizzlies is a winnable game, but Ja Morant has been back in the lineup, and I'm concerned how the Bulls are going to defend him, especially if Coby is the one that's going to be defending him. Which, first of all, by the way, a lot of you called me out in my last video when discussing top 5 point guards in the league 5 years from now and not including Ja Morant in that discussion. And yes, that was a complete oversight on my part. I did not leave him out intentionally. He will likely be a top 5 point guard in the league by then. Which, that makes it even harder for Coby White to be in that category. But back to the topic at hand here. So the Grizzlies is a winnable game. Now, the Blazers, they've been struggling, and the Bulls did beat them earlier this month in a great game, but I actually suspect the Blazers to come out hungry and redeeming themselves for this game. So in those 4 final games, again, this assumes that they beat the Hornets, I can see them beating the Grizzlies and likely upsetting one of the Lakers, Celtics, or Blazers. But to have them go 3-1 against those 4 teams to finish off the month above 500 is probably unlikely. I would obviously love it if they did, but my guess is they'll finish off the month at 500 rather than above 500. Now, as for the players you mentioned in terms of who would outscore between those 2 trios, I can get behind this because I think more and more we're going to see Zach start putting up less shots and getting his teammates more involved, as we've seen in recent games, because he's seen that style of play works in making his team more successful. I do think Coby is probably going to be going through a bit of a slump, as he's already really started to, and with Otto, we don't know if he's going to be playing. He was out the last game and no word yet on the status and if he's going to be available to play. So yeah, between Markkanen, who continues to be playing at a high level and shooting the ball very well, Wendell, still not much of a scorer, but he's been playing consistently well since starting out the season really cold. And then Thaddeus Young has actually been scoring at a decent rate off the bench, and he's been playing, unlike Otto. So I can get behind this. That being said, Zach and Coby can get hot and go off on any given night, so that could potentially skew things. Okay, next up we've got, oh yeah, this one. We've got Arn S, who says Zach Lavine will go down as being a better player than prime Derrick Rose. He can score on all 3 levels, and he is becoming a very good playmaker. So first of all, I don't know what you mean by scoring on all 3 levels. I assume that means from 3, mid-range, and in the paint, but I'm not quite sure. Second, sure, Lavine is becoming a decent playmaker, like in the past 2 games. But third, no, just no. Prime Derrick Rose was an MVP, an all-star, an all-NBA player. He led his team to the best record in the league twice. He scored at a much more efficient rate than Lavine. He wasn't as good as a 3-point shooter, but that wasn't necessary in the NBA back then. He was a significantly better passer, averaging 8 assists per game in his MVP season, and although Rose wasn't known for his defense, he was a better defender than Lavine. Like, come on, man, put some respect on the hometown kid's name. Lavine is not on that level yet. When Lavine can lead the Bulls to the best record in the league and impact the game Rose like the way Rose did, then we can talk, but for now, it's not even close. Next up, we've got Devin Logson, and he says, trade Zach Lavine for Bradley Beal. So I've actually seen a lot of people saying this recently, and although I would be for this as a Bulls fan if it's a straight up trade, the Wizards aren't going to do that. They would want more in return for a guy like Bradley Beal because they could likely get more for him from other teams. You would have to throw in a draft pick or another asset of some kind to make this intriguing for the Wizards. Now, I know Bradley Beal is a little bit older. He's 27, so a little bit older than Lavine. He's on a bigger contract. So you're probably asking, why would the Bulls need to include more? Well, first of all, they would have to make the salary adjustments work, but also Beal is a better player than Lavine. And I know that a lot of you guys call me a Lavine hater, but he's a better player. He's currently leading the league in scoring. He's a slightly better rebounder and passer than Lavine, and he is much, much more efficient, particularly in his lower turnover rate than Lavine. Beal's PER is 27.5, whereas Zach is at 21.3. So no, the Wizards would not agree to this trade straight up. And if they did, yeah, I think the Bulls should make that move. Now, I've got 3 here coming up next that I'm going to list as they all pertain to Daniel Gafford. And I've been hearing this a lot recently about how Gafford should be starting. So this first one is from Alexander Bame. He says the Bulls are better when Gafford is on the floor. Then I have Milan with the sort of hot take, I guess you could say, is start Gafford. And then finally PG, who says Gafford would be a better defender than Wendell if he would not get into foul trouble. So first off, if you've been watching my channel, you know that I am a huge Gafford fan. I think he's very underrated and should be getting more minutes. As far as the first take, that the Bulls are better when Gafford is on the floor, I agree with that to an extent. I do think Gafford brings that energy and spark off the bench that the team feeds off of in that sense. So yes, they feed off that energy and are a better team as a result, given the fact that momentum shifts the game when he's on the court. But overall though, are they better just because Gafford is on the floor? Well, the advanced stats would say no. The numbers actually say the Bulls are better with him off the court. However, advanced stats aren't the best when it's a small sample size or if a player doesn't get many minutes in general, which is the case with Gafford. So in short, I would say the energy and vibe of the unit on the court shifts when Gafford is out there, but overall, are they better with him on the court? Sometimes yes, but also sometimes not so much. Now, a lot of people have been talking about how Gafford should be starting, whether it's over Wendell or Lowry. Now, if you asked me this question those first few games of the season where Wendell was basically a non-factor, yeah, I might have agreed because Wendell was not playing like a starter, and Gafford was outplaying him whenever he was on the court. And starting him over Wendell made sense, having Wendell be a backup and switch between the 4 and the 5. But with Wendell improving his play and being consistently better, and Lowry also playing incredibly well, no, we just can't justify starting Gafford over either of those two, because as much as I like Gafford, he still has a lot of flaws in his game, namely his shooting, his off-the-ball defense, his post-up game needs to be improved a bit, and he's a bit of a liability from the free throw line. He's only shooting 50% from the line for his career. As far as Gafford being a better defender than Wendell if he didn't get into foul trouble, well, I hate to say it, but that's part of being a good defender, is knowing how to play tough, hard-nosed defense without committing fouls. Second, Gafford is a great rim protector, and he's a great on-the-ball defensive player, and he is better at getting offensive boards than Wendell is, but he's not as great with off-the-ball defense and guarding the perimeter, which Wendell is actually pretty good at. Wendell is also a great rim protector too. So I would disagree and say that Gafford, he is a good defender, but Wendell is a better overall defender between the two. And finally, this last take, and it's a long one, so bear with me while I read it. It's from Joe the Blacksmith, and he says, Garpax's master plan was to intentionally tank the team after firing Hoiberg, hiring Boylan as head coach with a 2-year deal, and giving Felicio and Otto bloated contracts were key pieces to that plan. The firings and hirings among management were mainly intended to disguise the tank operation. This operation enabled the Bulls to draft Coby White and Patrick Williams. How much hope would we have in this team's future without those two standout players? Anyone who feels optimistic about our core group should be thanking Garpax for taking such drastic measures. Now, I'm not sure if this person was entirely serious or if this was a troll take, especially given the fact that, Otto's bloated contract, that wasn't something that Garpax gave him. That was actually a part of the trade package. The Wizards actually gave him that contract. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to assume they are being serious. So, Joe, I think you're giving Garpax way too much credit. I don't think those guys are smart enough to put together a master plan like the one you've laid out. And even if they did intend for things to end up the way that you've described, they didn't do it really well, because the Bulls, all those years where they tanked, and I say that in air quotes, they won too many games to where they didn't have the opportunity to get more ping pong balls in the lottery and get a shot at guys like Zion Williamson, John Morant, Luka Doncic, Trae Young. So their plan basically failed if that was ultimately the goal. At any rate though, no, I don't think they were sophisticated to come up with an elaborate model like that. Essentially, they fired Tom Thibodeau because they didn't get along. They brought in Hoiberg and realized right away he's not ready to be an NBA coach, but they had to keep him to save face since they gave him a 5-year contract. Then finally had to fire him, then hired Boylan because they were buddies, and since they weren't able to bring in anyone better, they hired Boylan permanently and gave him an extension after he was the interim coach when they fired Fred Hoiberg. And when they noticed he was even worse than Hoiberg, they realized their time was running out and Paxson stepped down and Foreman was ultimately fired. I will say though, and I made a video about this around the time when I started my channel, about how Garpax aren't as bad as some people make them out to be, because one thing they did do exceedingly well was in drafting. The trouble was they couldn't retain the talented players they drafted. The 3 number 7 picks in the lottery between Lowry, Wendell, and Coby were all decent picks, at least for what was available at the time. Sure, they could have gotten some better picks in hindsight, like taking Donovan Mitchell, Michael Porter Jr., Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Tyler Hero, just to name a few, but a lot of teams passed on those guys. It's always easy to go back and after the fact and realize that there were better players available at a given spot within the draft. So it's not just the Bulls, that goes for a number of teams. Anyway, the point is, I think you're giving Garpax way too much credit. That was not their master plan that they concocted to destroy their own careers, and even if that was the plan, it wasn't a good one. So anyway, guys, there are still a lot of other takes you've left in the comments from the video earlier this morning even that I didn't get to. I think I might have to hold out on those ones until next week. Keep leaving your hot takes though, as I'll try to squeeze them in another week. As always, guys, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan and you enjoy videos like this. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will catch you in the next one.